Let's start with this one sentence. It's from the end of the story, but it's really our beginning. That was the year Kenya remembered who she was. It's so powerful, right? It hints at a crisis, a journey, and, well, a kind of awakening. To really get what that means, we need to rewind and look at how this incredible year kicked off.
So today we are diving deep into a fascinating story, the story of Kenya in 2025, and a radical plan that came to be known as the Renewal Pact. It's really a story about what happens when a whole nation gets pushed to the edge and has to make a choice about what it wants to become.
Okay, so before we can even talk about a renewal, you've got to understand the pressure cooker that was Kenya at the start of this year. The feeling on the ground wasn't just a little tense. It was simmering with years and years of frustration and just a total lack of trust in the system. Picture this. It's January 2025. The air is just thick with this feeling of, what now? People heard promises of reform a million times before, and they'd seen them broken every single time. So the whole country was just waiting, skeptical, exhausted, but maybe, just maybe, with a tiny spark of hope that this time might actually be different. And look, these weren't just abstract problems you'd read about in the news. No, this was the stuff of daily life for millions. The price of food going up, not enough jobs to go around, and this overwhelming feeling, especially for young people, that the people in charge just weren't listening. At all. This was the perfect breeding ground for a revolution. So into this complete mess steps our main character, Minister Achieng' Wekesa. The story sets her up as someone who is just done. Done with the political games, done with the corruption, and willing to take a huge career-ending risk for a shot at making things right. And this quote from her from this high-stakes cabinet meeting is everything. She completely reframes the problem. She's not blaming some outside enemy. She's looking inward, pointing the finger right at the system itself. It's a moment of incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous honesty. Her big idea was the Renewal Pact, and it was built on these 4 pillars. Each one was like a targeted missile aimed straight at corruption. Digital transparency? That means we can all see where the money goes. Independent oversight? No more sketchy backroom deals. And the audits and community councils? That's about giving power back to the people. This wasn't some boring policy proposal. It was a declaration of war on business as usual. And, well, you can probably guess what happens next, right? When you declare war, the other side is going to fight back. The old guard, all those powerful insiders who were getting rich off the broken system, they weren't about to just hand over the keys. The pushback was instant, and it was fierce. In this resistance, it has a name, sort of. They're just called the Circle. Think of them as the ultimate insiders club, a shadowy network of powerful politicians and business tycoons who loved the corrupt system exactly the way it was, because it worked for them. And Minister Wekesa's plan was a direct threat to their entire world. And then things get personal, and they get dark fast. This message gets sent to Minister Wekesa. It's not a political debate anymore. It's a straight-up threat. It just goes to show you how high the stakes were. The Circle was literally willing to make the country bleed just to protect their secrets. So really, it all boiled down to this. A choice between 2 completely different futures. On one side, you have the Renewal Pact, a future based on openness, accountability, and power for the people. And on the other side, the Circle, representing secrecy, hidden deals, and keeping things exactly as they are. But then, and this is where the story gets really interesting, a totally new player jumps into the ring, a force that the Circle had ignored and underestimated for years: the youth. As word of these reforms started to leak, the very people who felt like they had no voice decided to make themselves impossible to ignore. And their movement was pure 21st century. It wasn't just about marching in the streets. It was a digital tidal wave. This hashtag Kenya 2025 Reborn, just exploded online. It became this unifying symbol for a whole generation demanding change and accountability. It was a peaceful revolution fought with phones and keyboards. Okay, this is where it all comes to a head. The Circle makes their big move. They launch this huge cyber attack against the government, trying to cause chaos and make the reforms look like a disaster. But, and this is the beautiful irony, the weapon they use to try and kill the movement becomes the very thing that brings them down. The crisis they created became their own undoing. The whole thing played out over 72 absolutely frantic hours.
At hour 1, systems go down, chaos everywhere. For the next day and a half, Wekesa and her team are in a race against time. And then, at hour 72, they find it. The smoking gun. The attack wasn't some foreign power, it was an inside job, and they traced it right back to the Circle.
The public reaction was explosive. Parliament had no choice but to launch a massive investigation. And what they found was just staggering. I mean, look at this. We're talking ghost projects that were funded but never built, forged contracts, hidden bank accounts, billions with a B siphoned away from the people. For the first time, everyone could see the rot, clear as day.
And all that anger, all that outrage, it didn't just fade away. It turned into fuel. It wasn't a debate anymore. The proof was right there for everyone to see, and the demand for change was deafening. This was the moment the Renewal Pact went from being just an idea to being an absolute necessity.
So, what did all this fighting actually achieve? Well, here's what started to happen. Real, tangible results. Government budgets became public for anyone to see. Youth councils were given a real seat at the table. And, maybe most important of all, they passed the first ever laws to protect whistleblowers, the very people you need to keep a system honest. This is what it was all for. Now, the story is very clear that the country wasn't magically fixed overnight. Of course not. The deep problems were still there. But something fundamental had shifted. There was a new feeling in the air, a sense of shared purpose. Hope was no longer just some cheesy word on a poster. You could actually feel it. And that brings us right back to where we started. And it leaves us with one last, pretty heavy question. The story of Kenya 2025 is about a nation remembering its own power and finding its collective voice. But the real challenge, the one this question leaves us with, is figuring out how to make sure that voice never goes silent again.